Welcome to All Autism Talk, connecting the autism community one podcast at a time. Our podcast offers friendly conversations with inspiring individuals in the autism community. All Autism Talk is brought to you by Learn Behavioral and the Learn Provider Network. Now, here's your host.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode. As we all know, consistency in ABA services is really important. This episode is really an opportunity for parents and caregivers to get a peek behind the curtain into some of the conversations that we're having. Some of the conversations we're having about how we can continue to develop staff and keep them engaged so that they can provide a better care to those that are receiving ABA services. It's also an opportunity for us to discuss and share with practitioners what is being done and how they can take some of these practices and bring them to their supervision and to their mentorship of behavior technicians. So we had an opportunity recently to sit down and discuss this with Melissa Furman. Melissa Furman is the clinical director for Total Spectrum, and in addition to her regular job functions, she and her team are also conducting research on staff retention and staff incentives. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Melissa Furman. All right. Well, Melissa, thanks so much for being here. Welcome to our show.
Thank you. Thank you.
I've had the pleasure of knowing you for several years at this point, but I don't know that our audience has met you before because you haven't been on before. So can you just start by giving us a little background about you as a person and about you as a clinician?
Absolutely. So my name is Melissa Furman. I am the clinical director for Michigan West for Total Spectrum. And I currently oversee 2 learning centers, one in Kalamazoo and one in Portage. And we are recently expanding up to Grand Rapids as well, which is about an hour north of Kalamazoo. And so I oversee and manage those 3 sites right now in Michigan. I attended James Madison University in Virginia, in Harrisonburg, Virginia, for undergraduate and graduate school. I decided I wanted to stay and hang out there a little bit longer after I finished my undergrad. And at that university, we had 2 clinics on campus. So we had a parent-child interaction therapy clinic, and we had a multidisciplinary clinic. And I was the clinic coordinator for both of those clinics on campus. So going through undergrad, collecting data for students who were working on their theses, on their dissertations, and then kind of continue that into grad school and maintained both of those centers at that university. And so parent training is a passion of mine, working directly with those caregivers and coming up with strategies and techniques to make things successful at home and across communities, and also working with multidisciplinary teams in that other clinic that we had on campus. So after finishing my graduate degree at JMU, I moved across the country to California. I lived right outside of Palm Springs, working in the Inland Empire. I was there for about a year, and then I decided, all right, let's move across the country again. And Trisha Evans was my clinical director at the time, and she moved back to Michigan, where her family is. And I was always kind of looking to move somewhere closer to home after my husband got out of the Marine Corps, and so we kind of planted roots in Michigan. I followed Trish here from California about 5.5 years ago, and started this region with Trish with no clients and no VTs. And now we have serving about 150 clients with over 100 behavior technicians in the past 5.5 years.
And 2 soon to be 3 clinics. That's great. That's great. It's so great. I met you at the beginning part or the middle part of that journey, and it's just been great to see you grow and develop, and to hear how you've pushed behavior analysis forward, right? Not just for families, but also for, not just for clients, but also for parents, for caregivers, for staff, for people who are becoming behavior analysts. And that's kind of what you did recently at ABAI, correct? Or ABAI, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we were just at ABAI last weekend presenting some of our findings for one of the projects that we have been working on for about a year now.
That's great. So tell us a little bit about the research you were doing. I think it was all centered around staff retention and making sure that our staff are staying around and feeling connected to the work that they're doing. So tell us a little bit about what you set up and kind of the parameters of how you got there.
Mm-hmm. So to get to the presentation last weekend at ABAI, I have a amazing supervisee in his master's program right now, Michael Rux. He is definitely one of a kind in this field, and he is very passionate about using Excel. He can manipulate those functions 10 times better than I could. So huge shout out to Michael Rux. But he wanted to kind of dive deeper into some organizational behavior management systems and using what he's passionate about in the field. And I have a managing behavior analyst, Carrie Wood, who one of her special interests is organizational behavior management as well. And so we kind of put that team together with myself and really wanted to look at what can we do system-wise on a local level to reduce behavior technician turnover. And a lot of the research shows that behavior technician burnout and behavior technician perceived lack of supervisor feedback are two of the biggest reasons that behavior technicians are leaving the field. And that's the piece that we wanted to hit home. How could we address those two biggest reasons that technicians are leaving the field? So our clients right now are very interested in Pokemon. That is one of the hot topics at the centers. They trade Pokemon cards. They create these Pokemon games. They love the characters. So what Michael, Carrie, and I did was create Pokemon cards for all of our supervisors. So every supervisor had this customized Pokemon card that was so detailed. They had powers for each of the BCBAs and a funny picture on the front of the Pokemon card. And the back of the Pokemon card had different categories of feedback that the BCBAs could deliver to the behavior technician. So categories we looked at were administrative tasks, programming during supervision, engagement with clients, and de-escalation. So those were our four main categories that we were measuring feedback. And the behavior technicians would be delivered these Pokemon cards by the BCBAs during supervision, and they would provide positive descriptive praise while they delivered these Pokemon cards. Mm. So then they could take these Pokemon cards and trade them in. They could save up for BT socials on a quarterly basis. They could be entered into a raffle, ran preference assessments to really see what do our technicians want to work for. And then they could trade in these Pokemon cards. And we really saw that just increasing the level of positive descriptive praise during field supervision and incentivizing a program to get our BTs to want to work towards these socials and raffles, we saw turnover decrease over the span of a year.
That's so fascinating. I mean, I'm loving the idea of having a Pokemon card of my own, right? I remember being a kid and having like baseball cards, and it was like such a huge thing. It's like that's what I'm envisioning. I guess that shows how old I am to our audience. But I want to stick with I want to dive into a few different things that you brought up. So thank you for providing that overview for everybody. I really want to talk about this like positive descriptive praise. Mm-hmm. Can you explain to us a little bit? Give us an example. Give us some details around that, and maybe describe how some people can use that outside of session.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So when we look at praise, we typically categorize it into two different types of praise. We have labeled praise and unlabeled praise, or descriptive praise and non-descriptive praise, where that unlabeled praise would really just be, hey, nice job, or I like that you did that. Good job doing that work. Versus labeled praise or descriptive praise, where you are stating the behavior that the behavior technician engaged in while you're praising them. So, for example, I really like how you converted all of your sessions on time this week. Here's a Pokemon card. And so really, really verbalizing what you're praising them for, with the idea that that behavior will be reinforced and we'll see more of that behavior that you just described.
I love that. I think it's so important for us to do that. I mean, as opposed to, I'm thinking of myself who I say like good effort or nice try or, things like that. Just giving a little bit more detail to the praise, I think really makes it kind of come to life, but also it really labels for the learner what they did a good job of, right? Mm-hmm. They could be thinking something totally different than what you're thinking. They could be thinking, wow, I did this, but they're praising me for this. And now I get to learn in that feedback, as opposed to, I'll just keep doing what I've been doing, which may or may not be the right thing. Right.
Yeah, exactly. They get to hear exactly what we want to see more of to reinforce that behavior as much as we can.
And I imagine that that's true with our clients as well, right? I mean, I think that's helpful for everyone.
Yeah, and it's helpful to use that behavior skills training model that our BCBAs are using with behavior technicians, because at the end of the day, right, we're using ABA strategies, using this incentive plan to increase behavior technicians doing the right thing, right? Where then we want our behavior technicians to use similar strategies to increase behaviors that our clients are doing that we want to see more of. So you're exactly right? Like we want to see that trickle down effect with the reinforcement.
Yeah. Something I've heard, and I've heard again recently, was there's more than one learner in the room. And I think that's super important to recognize that our technicians, really any technicians, are learning the job. They don't necessarily, some of them have a lot of experience, but they don't necessarily have a wealth of experience or a master's degree or have been doing, behavior analytic work for 5 years. Some of them, this may be their first exposure to behavior analysis. And so just giving them that feedback, and to use your term, positive descriptive praise, I think really brings it home for them to say, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is what I'm doing right. This is what to do more of. And I think just recognizing that, like, everybody's kind of learning, and we all are, because there's so much to learn. But that's just an observation.
Yeah. And I think, going off of that too, the observational learning piece as well, right? Like our behavior technicians are seeing other behavior technicians getting reinforced for engaging in behaviors that we want to see more of. So the idea, right, that other behavior technicians who might be newer will start to engage in more of those behaviors just through observational learning, seeing their friends getting reinforced for those things. And, they got to earn a $5 Starbucks gift card. I want to do that so I can earn a $5 Starbucks gift card.
Right. I want to highlight something, and I just think it's an interesting note in something that you said. You gave some great examples of the feedback, but they happen to be around admin tasks. And I think that's super important to highlight, because, you can be a great clinician, but if you don't do the admin task, then the data is not being recorded or reported or things like that. So can you explain a little bit more of why you included admin tasks?
Yeah, so we included admin tasks as one of our categories on the Datamon cards, really because we want to make sure that the technicians are getting credit for what they're doing. They're converting their sessions, they're adding your session notes into Central Reach, and also for integrity, right? Like we're billing insurance companies for the services that we're providing, and we want to make sure that the session notes that are added to our appointments and that the billing notes that are being converted have clinical integrity to them and are documenting everything that occurred during that session as a true representation of what session looked like that day. So when the funder pulls that session note and reads it, they can kind of paint a picture of exactly what happened during session. And it's important, since we are billing insurance companies, to make sure that those admin tasks are just as important as the clinical tasks day to day with the client.
I think that gets lost so much, right? We tend to think, and gosh, I'll confess to everybody, I'm guilty of that, right? I remember when I was a clinician, it was like, no, my most important thing is my face-to-face time with the client. But you're right, when we leave the home or when they leave the clinic, all of a sudden, how can anyone else understand what's happening? Or how can we report on that? Or how can we demonstrate that through data or through notes or whatever it may be? And so I think there is this duality of importance that just an interesting thing that you highlighted. I don't know if you intended to do that or if that was just circumstance, but I think it is important for up and coming behavior analysts, for behavior technicians. There are two parts to the job. I mean, there are many, but there are two big buckets.
Yeah, and I think communicating to behavior technicians the why behind these things is also extremely important, right? Like, I don't want to be the type of person that says convert, 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 right? But if we explain why, right, it's so important to convert to our entry-level behavior technicians who this might not be their long-term career path, right? They might be in college just trying to get their foot in their door and see if psychology is even what they're interested in, right? So giving them a little bit more of the why to hopefully get that buy-in to make sure that things are being documented the way that they need to be documented.
Just want to highlight one thing for our audience that's not familiar. We use converting sessions as them going from being scheduled to those that have happened. And it's a way that we track hours. And that's just a term that we use. And it's a term in some of the software programs that we're using. So just so everybody's aware. Melissa, you mentioned that there are a couple of different things that BTs, behavior technicians, can sort of save up for. I'm curious about how you got to those things. I mean, certainly everyone is motivated by different community engagement or different reinforcements, right? How did you get to those menu items? You mentioned a preference assessment, but if you could just walk us through that process, that'd be great.
So Michael, Carrie, and I created a Microsoft Forms that we sent out to all of our staff, asking them what reinforces them, what gets them out of bed every single morning to come to work, what will motivate them. And we had about 10 different questions on the form. And yes, no questions, open-ended questions to really try to hone in on what do staff want to work for, what's going to get them to get out of bed every morning. And so after we collected that preference assessment using Microsoft Forms, kind of looked at the data and really identified that food is a very big motivator. And I'm not surprised. I feel like my BCBAs are also very motivated by food. So running monthly raffles where they could earn Starbucks gift cards, Big B gift cards, pizza cards, right? Like that food piece was definitely a preferred item. And we had quite a few responses on socials, and that was pretty vague, but going somewhere outside of work hours, on a Saturday morning or on a Friday afternoon, when BTs could have the opportunity to come together and socialize. And so we've done socials at quite a few different places. Trampoline park always seems to be something that's very, very, very popular.
Man, I'm sore just hearing that.
I'm like, I'm not sure why, but they love it. So we do it. We've been to the trampoline park a couple times. Around Halloween, pumpkin carving was super popular. They wanted to carve pumpkins. So we had everyone come to the center on a Saturday afternoon right before Halloween, and we bought food for everyone, and they got to carve pumpkins together. So the socials kind of change depending on time of year, especially in Michigan. We can really only be outside, 3 to 4 months out of the year in this cold state. So we have to get creative with our indoor activities, but try to get outside as much as we can and create a positive culture for our technicians.
Yeah, I think that highlights something that's super important for people, and it's the emotional connection to the work that they're doing, but also to the people that they work with, right? And I think what I'm hearing from that is, yes, it's fun to go to the trampoline park and it's fun to go pumpkin carving and it's fun to do those things, but really it's enjoyable to get to know the people you work with and to the people that are around you in a different way than you have time for on a day-to-day basis, right? Our jobs are a little unique in that we're not we don't get time to kind of have the water cooler chat, right? There's not that, there may be a couple of minutes, but it's while you're doing 5 different things. And so what I'm hearing is that people just want a different connectivity at work than maybe they're getting. I imagine that that's true outside of our fields and outside of the field of behavior analysis. But just curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head when we ran that preference assessment. Any type of outing seemed to be a preferred reward for the team. It didn't matter exactly what it was, just that they could come together outside of work and, not feel like they have to get to work 5 to 10 minutes early to say hi to their friend and check in on how the weekend went, but that they could go to the trampoline park on a Saturday afternoon and actually have a conversation about something outside of their clients. And our field in general, right, has a range of 30 to 70% turnover, which is astronomical, right? I guess that's a big range, but how can we mitigate that, right? And I think that positive cultural and that social piece where people can feel like they're part of something bigger, right? They have that community at the center. Is very important.
Yeah. I love the idea of all of what you've put together, and I'm just trying to think of ways that you can expand that, right? It doesn't have to be Pokemon cards and pizza gift cards, right? It can be. It certainly doesn't have to be, though. What are ways that people can take this research and apply it to their work setting, and to their teams?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. We have kind of really dove deep into the details of this project, but taking a step back and really looking at the ABA principles that were used, right? They're very straightforward ABA principles that we used. And you can assign any token to, or pair any token with a reinforcer, right? As long as it's conditioned properly. So how do you condition a token with a reinforcer? That can be a popsicle stick that you pair with social outings. That could be, tally marks on a wall next to behavior technician's name, right? It doesn't have to be these intricate Pokemon cards, but the idea is we created a system that can be duplicated across regions, across companies, across states, that they can take pieces of the system that we've put together, but individualize it based off of the need of that region or that company, and utilize the ABA principles of reinforcement, and the ABA principle of contingencies, whether that's independent or group contingencies, but creating a system that we could send to someone else and say, here are the bare bones. Now you can take this and individualize it, but giving them the tools in their toolbox to be able to hopefully reduce turnover across other states and regions too.
Right. I think the important thing that you said in there is positive reinforcement, right? I definitely don't want people to do, the names on the chalkboard with tally marks of how many times you get to give corrective feedback. That's not the goal in this.
Please no.
Yes. I think there's a lot of research to say that doesn't really help, and that doesn't work. So, but the idea of really pairing this positive descriptive praise with some type of system, right, that can lead to a larger reinforcement, I think is really beneficial for people. I imagine this is true outside of, I'm thinking of jobs that are, our clients' parents may work. This can work in any industry, in any workforce. I think it's just a matter of tailoring the I'm using air quotes, tailoring the Pokemon cards to be whatever will work for you in that environment, right? That's what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it just really goes back to those basic ABA principles. And as long as they're being implemented correctly, we should see the behavior of whether it's technicians or whether it's, workers in target, right? Like if we can identify a target behavior that we want to see increase, and we can identify something in the environment that they can exchange for a bigger reward later, it's already a step in the right direction to get people to hopefully want to come to work more.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, gosh, we didn't talk about this, but I think we should dive into it. Turnover is an issue. You mentioned it, 30 to 70% turnover, right? Not necessarily within Learn or Total Spectrum, just in the field in general. How does that impact clients? How does that impact families? How does that impact those in our care with making progress towards their ultimate goals?
It's tough. I mean, it definitely impacts, I think, a lot more than what people initially feel when they submit resignations. And it's even more difficult when people leave without notice, right? That continuity of care with clients is vital for progress, right? We want to see change over time for the better, for our clients to be successful in the communities in which they live in. And with that, to get to that point, right, we have to have consistency with sessions. And even if we have a behavior technician calling off once a week, right, for a client that might have session Monday through Friday, they cancel once a week and the client can't come to the center that day for ABA and not able to get their therapy that day, the day that they can come back, behavior technician might have to start programming over again, right? Or increase how many times they're running a program to even get back to a baseline where they were the day before. And that continuity of care with not only the behavior technicians, but with the families, right? Like when behavior technicians are calling off, we have families that can't keep their kids home during the day, right? Like they're working. Mom and dad have to go to work, and they can't take time off. And so not only is it affecting our clients and the progress that we see with our clients every single day when they have that gap in their schedule, but then it affects the caregivers as well, and them attending parent training sessions if a behavior technician called out. And that might have been a day that the supervisor was going to go through something that was really important for generalization at home. And if the behavior technician calls out and the caregiver can't get to parent training, BCBA might not be able to tackle that strategy for another week or two. And that's another week or two that the caregiver is going to have to be managing things at home without the support that they need.
Yeah, I was thinking in my head, as you said, if they cancel on a Friday, that's 20% of the week, right? And that's a big chunk, right? I think that what you just highlighted is really important for everybody, really everybody involved to know is it's important. This is not like it's a once a month therapy, right? ABA is more intensive, right? It happens more often, sometimes longer session, depending on child need and family need, things like that. It is important to get in the time and to do it with intent.
Absolutely. Yeah, I typically think about an ABA clinical recommendation like a prescription from a doctor, right? Like if you have a doctor tell you to take your pill twice a day, every single day, you're not gonna, hopefully, skip days here and there, right? Like you're gonna take that medicine every single day. And that's how I try to frame it to caregivers and to behavior techs, right? Like this is a medical recommendation that needs to be followed just like any other script would be from a doctor.
So Melissa, I want to go back in time for just a moment. I think I met you when you were still at James Madison. I think and you were presenting, you had a poster presentation. This is a couple years ago. And I don't want to get into the details of that. That's a whole separate thing. But what I do want to talk about is I feel like you have constantly been at the forefront of, pushing research and putting yourself out there, and you've done posters and presentations and what's something that you would tell up and coming behavior analysts or emerging behavior analysts as they start their journey, right? I think it's easy for a lot of people to stay behind the scenes, but what's something you would tell them to encourage them to get in front of the poster, in front of the audience?
Asking me some good questions today, Richie. I would tell an emerging behavior analyst or someone who was, kind of getting their feet wet in the field that change comes from being uncomfortable. And if you are uncomfortable doing something, you are changing your behavior and putting your foot out there for what's next. It's tough, right? Getting in front of an audience or having conversation with people who are novel to you can be difficult. But with that and with each experience that you encounter shapes you into the person and the behavior analyst that you'll become.
I think that's true not only with research, but it's also true with just the practice, right? Get to know a client who has a different need than you've experienced in the past, or get to know a client who's maybe more aggressive than you've worked with in the past. By being around and asking questions and observing, you brought up observational learning. I think that's true again for us as humans as much as it is for anyone who's trying to learn anything new, right? Just be around it, see it, be a fly on the wall, like observe, see what's working, pay attention to what's not working also. I think you've done a great job of that in both regards, right? Being around for it, but also being willing to jump in front of the audience and give the presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. And asking questions, right? Like, yes, being a fly on the wall when the time is right, and asking questions when the time is right as well.
So I wasn't there to see you at ABAI, but I know it was this week. How did the presentation go?
It went really well. I was blown away with the turnout at the poster presentation. We presented the last day of ABAI, and it's like you never quite know how the last day poster presentation at ABAI it's going to go. But I was really impressed with the turnout and the connections that my team and I were able to make this past weekend in Philadelphia presenting, and quite a few people interested in partnering with us and expanding research and talking about next steps together. And we had pictures on our poster, and I think that caught a lot of people's eye, and they would walk over to us and be like, yes, I do want to hear more about this once they realized what it was. So it was an excellent turnout. I was really impressed.
You alluded to it, and it was actually my next question. So what is the next step for this research? And right, I know you've got other clinics coming and all that other fun stuff, but with regards to research, what's next? What's the next iteration of this? Is this something that you're implementing in your clinics ongoing? Is there a new iteration of it? What's happening? What's coming?
Yeah, so we really want to kind of tighten up some of the contingencies that we have in place with the exchange, number of cards for incentives and whatnot. So that is our short-term project, is to kind of tighten up those contingencies. After we see some stability with turnover, tightening up those contingencies, we would like to turn this into an actual research project and, work with the clinical development team and figure out what those next steps look like. And I would love to be able to duplicate this across other regions in Michigan as well. Right now, we're just doing it in West, but would love to have Central and East duplicate the system that we're working on over here and see if we see the same effects across regions.
I love it. When do I get my Pokemon card?
I will have our team put one together for you, Richie, and send it your way. You have to send me what your superpowers are going to be.
I'll have to think on that. Well, Melissa, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for pushing our field forward and for continuing to help us discover more about ourselves as we go, and really taking care of the staff in our care. We appreciate you and all the work you're doing.
Absolutely. Thank you for everything.
I hope you learned a lot from that conversation with Melissa Furman. For me, there were a couple of things that stood out. One, she talked a lot about positive descriptive praise, and I think that's something that we should be doing more in every avenues of our life, and I should be doing that more with my own children. That's just a personal takeaway. The second thing that I learned from Melissa is not necessarily about her research, just about research in general and our field in general. And I've recognized that our field is always evolving, from the way that we provide services, yes, but also to how we hire, train, and develop our technicians. And by considering our current research, I think it helps us get ready for the next iteration of how we can develop talented technicians and keep them engaged in the work that they're doing. As always, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Autism Therapies. And if you have a show suggestion or other feedback, please send us a message at our website, allautismtalk.com. And feel free to subscribe, rate, and review us at Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, take care.
We hope you've enjoyed today's episode of All Autism Talk. This podcast is brought to you by Learn Behavioral, the leading network of providers serving children with autism and other special needs. Visit us at learnbehavioral.com. Listen to previous episodes at allautismtalk.com, on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. All Autism Talk, connecting the autism community one podcast at a time.